Hello everyone, my name is Aisha Downey and today I'm going to be talking about a common error that ESL students face inside the classroom. And I'm also going to be mentioning a few things from the two articles that we had to read. The first article is Error Correction in ESL, Learners' Preferences by James Oladejo, and the second one was the One Size Fits All Recast and Prompts. Recast Prompts in L2 Learning by Nina Spada. I want to first talk about the article from Oladejo. One of the things that I found interesting from that article is that of the 5 error correction techniques that were suggested in the article, the one that was most preferred by the learners in the study was that the teacher should provide relevant comments and comments and uses which might enable them to self-correct. So in this article, I found interesting that the learners that the person who did the study on these learners, they found out that the learners would prefer the teachers to self-correct them as opposed to just giving them the answer. So one of the things that, before I get into my common error from an ESL student, I want to go ahead and talk about the one size fits all recast prompts in L2 learning. And one of the things that stuck out to me was that towards the end of the article, the author said one size doesn't fit all. The effectiveness of any corrective feedback technique needs to be evaluated in relation to a learner's proficiency level. So one technique may work for one student, but it may not always work for another. So I found that interesting as well. So some of the corrective feedback techniques that were mentioned in this article were recast, repetition, clarification, request, elicitation, metalinguistic feedback, and explicit correction. So my common error that I wanted to mention, I don't have a person to model this for me, so I'm going to have to be the student and the teacher. So ESL student might confuse pronouns, and might say something like, "Hey, teacher, my mother told me she broke your leg yesterday." So the first thing, my mother told me she broke your leg. So I, as a teacher, I would use repetition, and repetition just means the teacher repeats the student's error and adjusts its intonation to draw students' attention to it. So the teacher wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, that's wrong." So I, as the teacher, would repeat what the student said. So I would say, "Your mother broke what? I can let you know, or I can assure you that my leg is not broken." So hopefully with that um, sarcasm, or with that sense of, I don't know the word, with that drawing attention to that would hopefully get the ESL student to see that, wait a minute, your leg isn't broken. I meant to say my mother's leg is broken. So by me saying your mother broke what, I can let you know, or I can assure you that my leg is not broken. Hopefully that will get the ESL student to see that, okay, let me go back and rephrase this and say, my mother told me that she broke her leg, and not my mother told me she broke your leg. So hopefully by repeating it several times, hopefully the student will be able to see, okay, I found my error, and I see that instead of it being your, it's she. Okay, so that was one thing that I wanted to point out. Another thing that with the same sentence, the teacher could also do a recast. So without directly indicating that the student's sentence was incorrect, the teacher can reformulate the student's error or provide the correction. So if he said, "My mother told me she broke your leg," I can just repeat what the kid said, but instead I would put the correct pronoun in. So if the kid said, "My mother told me she broke your leg," I can say, "Oh, my mother told me you broke your leg." I'm sorry. My mother. So for example, if the kid said, "My mother told me she broke your leg," I can say, "My mother told me she broke her leg." So I'm emphasizing her. So then the kid can say, "Oh, yeah, my mother told me she broke her leg." So recast and repetition will work great for getting ESL students to correct their errors.